many people would claim that the craft or UAPs are potentially using anti-gravity technology. That's something that's quite common. Would it be pertinent for people like yourself in the Galileo project to look for signatures like gravitational waves? And could you potentially track these using LIGO or other laser interferometers?
Okay, so let me first say what is known in terms of the current science that we know about. First of all, according to Einstein's theory of gravity, you can get repulsive gravity. And in fact, you get it when the vacuum, the vacuum is what you have when you remove all the matter. So when the vacuum itself has some mass density, mass per unit volume, or energy per unit volume, you can show that in the context of Einstein's theory of gravity, that gives you a repulsive force. And actually, we observe it. So Einstein thought, well, it's a mistake of my theory that it gives this so-called cosmological constant, that has to do with the energy of the vacuum. He thought, oh, I should get rid of it because otherwise, he was thinking about it just to balance the expansion of the universe. At the time, he thought the universe doesn't expand, so he thought having a repulsive force of gravity balancing the attractive force of matter would make the universe static, not expanding, if you have a perfect balance between the two forces. But then he realized he was wrong because Edwin Hubble argued the universe is expanding, and Einstein said, oh, that was a mistake. I shouldn't have thought about this repulsive gravity. But it turns out that it exists. And in fact, even though the universe is expanding, its expansion is accelerating recently. And that means that there is something pushing galaxies apart, a repulsive gravitational force, which is believed to be a result of this cosmological constant, the vacuum energy density. And so it exists. We know of that. What is the nature of the vacuum energy that is causing this expansion? Where does it come from a fundamental physics point of view? We don't really understand that. Okay, but the existence of a repulsive gravity, anti-gravity, is known to be real because the Nobel Prize was awarded for that, and for the discovery of the accelerated expansion of the universe. So the universe is not only expanding, it's expanding with a speed that is increasing over time, as if something is pushing everything apart. And that happens only in recent history. If you go back in time, early on, the density of matter was so large, much larger than the density of the vacuum. The matter density dominated, the radiation density dominated, and at that point, gravity was attractive. So it's only a recent phenomenon over the past half of the age of the universe that matter and radiation were diluted enough for the vacuum to take over and dominate and show this accelerated expansion. Before that, it wasn't really important, except maybe very early on in the universe. Okay, so that's what we know. Now, that doesn't mean that we can manipulate the vacuum and sort of engineer it to propel things based on what we know. We don't know how to do that. Let's put it that way. We don't know how to sort of excavate the vacuum and use it for propulsion. But that doesn't mean that it cannot be done. I mean, perhaps a more advanced scientific civilization would be able to do that. So I wouldn't rule it out. It's just that we don't have any idea of how to do that, how to, propel something using the vacuum. We don't know how to do that. And the other thing I would say is gravitational waves are really difficult to excite. But even if you excite them, it's, in order to produce a meaningful level of a gravitational wave so that we can detect it with an observatory like LIGO or the future observatories that we will build, what you need is a very high concentration of mass, like you get in a black hole. But the point is, if you have that concentration of mass, just the Newtonian effect, forget about gravitational waves, just the fact that you have this mass that is a very large mass in order to generate strong waves, that mass by itself acts on anything on Earth using, based on Newton's law of gravity. Okay, so just like the sun acts on us or Jupiter acts on us. So before you even worry about gravitational waves, there would be this Newtonian effect that would move things around, and we would notice it because the oceans would show a tide. And so don't think about gravitational waves as if that would be the only way we would learn about a massive compact object that, because long before that, there would be effects like on the oceans, a tidal effect due to the Newtonian gravity that would move the oceans around in a way that is noticeable. So I would suggest not to think about gravitational waves as a good way of detecting objects, because there are much bigger effects that come into play before gravitational waves affect us or are measurable. Just based on gravity, I'm saying there are other effects based on gravity that are much stronger, like the Newtonian force of a passing object. So it's very difficult to generate detectable gravitational waves without producing a strong Newtonian force. That's my point. So I would argue, let's not think about gravitational waves as a good way to detect things. We can use Newtonian gravity to detect them much more easily. And on top of that, there are other things that we can observe, of course, using light, radiation, either reflected off the object or emitted by the object. Much easier to detect, much, much easier.